there's the air cleaner, there's the air intake, and I actually have two different books that I use to work on my car. I actually have a Haynes model, Datsun workshop manual, but I also spent the money and I got myself a original Datsun 240Z service manual from the Nissan Motor Company years back. I've actually had this car since 1978. Coming into our fuel line, so it comes up, goes through here to the mechanical fuel pump. The electrical fuel pump is in the very back of the engine, or back of the car underneath, right by the fuel tank. We know that we have fuel coming up here because we measured the fuel pressure, and we also were able to see that there was fuel that should be in the bottom of the carburetors, in the float chambers. And so now what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to take the carburetors off and check to make sure that the floats are seated properly. Now the problem that I have is, in the manual they tell you that you should be able to see where the floats are adjusted, because in the side of the carburetor there is actually a little glass window. But I've never been able to see what the actual fuel level is. So right here, you can see right there is the float that I'm supposed to be able to see the window in there, and of course I never can see anything.
Right.
Can you see it?
Right there.
Right there.
Yeah, I see it.
But it's always so dark, and the window is so dark, the fuel is so dark, you never can see where the float is actually located at. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to pull off the carburetors, take a look to see where the floats are. So first thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to disconnect the chokes. Then we're going to have to just take off the adjusting tubes between here. We have to take off the vacuum lines, the fuel lines. We'll have to take off the water jacket. And there's 4 bolts that actually unscrew the nuts to take off the carburetors. And then we'll look to see if the floats are out of adjustment.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a screw here on the side to hold it in place. Should have take that off. I always try to put the screws and nuts and bolts back where they go so they don't lose track of them. So there's 4 screws here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 that I'd actually loosened previously. And so this guy's going to come up like this. It's going to come loose a little bit like this. I have to take the fuel lines off now. Loosen the 2 fuel lines. So just like we did before, we're going to get just a little bit of fuel come through. So what I'm doing is I'm prying up on the hose using my flat blade screwdriver. Okay, kind of surprised there wasn't some fuel in there. So just as a quick check, what we're going to do, make sure that the fuel pump is coming on. Pumping fuel, even though we got pressure. This guy here. This guy here. Mary, could you turn on the key real quick? Would you turn on the key, assistant? Miss beautiful, darling assistant. It's not in there. Go start! Just turn the key, don't start it. Just turn the key. Till it goes pump, 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 pump. Okay, turn it off. Okay, so we got fuel coming out of both of them. Thank you. Alright, so we're getting fuel. There we go. So this is going to come up. Out. Pump it up like that. So I'll loosen that. This end. I'm going to loosen this on this end so I can get this out of the way. Okay, give me a little bit more room in there. Okay. So you just need to get them to where you can move them with your fingers. Because once you do that, you'll be able to get in there. But the bottom ones are just a mess. So what you have to do is you actually have to take the throttle linkage and move it out of the way to get underneath there to get access to it. And there is just no easy way to do that. A short 12 millimeter. Okay, so we're going to remove the flame trap because we need to get that out of our way. Would be helpful. Stubby. It's part of the smog control. See, I can only get it with my fingertips. Alright. So now if I pull this loose, the whole assembly will just come straight forward. And there you have your HMB 46W Hitachi carburetor. So as you can see, there's my throttle linkage. There is where the cooling water for the cooling jacket goes in. There is the window that we're supposed to be able to see fluid in, and I still can't see if it's got fluid in there. Dang. Well, isn't that weird? It looks like it's got fluid. Can you see it in there?
Yeah, I can see it barely.
How about there, more sunlight? That's kind of bad news. It may it may mean that there's nothing wrong with the carburetor. Something's funny. All right, so we have the same 4 nuts that we have to take loose on the front carburetor. loose. Here on this bottom one, you can see there's not much room. That's why I have to hold this up and then go between. The linkage. And I'm just going to leave that guy here. Now this car has been worked on by myself and mechanics, and there's one odd nut. And it's always been an odd nut, and I don't know why they did it that way. All right, there we go. There's the second HMB, so that's the front carburetor. So let's take it out, take a look and see what we see. That one looks like it doesn't have any gas in the carburetor float. So maybe this guy is the one that's out of whack. So it's got some fluid in there, but it looks like it's really low. So this is the front carburetor. And so the way it's supposed to work is that the front carburetor controls the amount of air. So this is the mixture. So this is just the mixture. But there's a tube that runs between the two carburetors. So this tube runs from this carburetor to this carburetor. So the rear carburetor mixture is controlled by the same valve that's controlling this carburetor's mixture. And so that's kind of quirky. That means that the fuel ratio mixture has got to be controlled by the pistons inside of there.
Okay.
So that's why some people don't like these carburetors. And when I go to clean it, keep the spray down, contained area. And I want to protect the jet, so I have a little fixture to hold my jets. So there's the front carburetor. So you can see right here, there's the valve seat.
Right where?
See the valve seat is down there.
So, okay, that's the valve seat.
That's the valve seat.
Okay.
Okay. Take off. Okay. Make sure that we remember how that's going to go in there. So that's the choke. So one of the things is that this is vacuum operated, so it's supposed to pull up as the vacuum, and that means that when the car starts in the choke, it was then supposed to adjust and open and move the actuator. But these guys leak, so they're an air place they leak, and so I just have them stop it off. All that fuel that's inside of there is going to want to come rushing out. I'll try and capture some of it, because this opening right here allows the normal air pressure. So there's the little fluid is the cooling. As you can see, when I pour it like this, it's going to pour out gasoline. So I'm going to get some of it, capture some of that gasoline. Now you can see in the throat, carburetor throat right here, you see the little piece that's sticking up. That actually is for starting, it's basically a straight down into the bowl, and as the air goes across it, it's going to pull gas up and helps it to start. And you can see it's got a spacer underneath. So you have to see. So let's check on this side right here. This is an inline filter. So as the fuel is pumped in, remember the fuel is pumped in here. It comes down and it's going to go into this filter before it actually goes into the bowl. So we can check to see what that filter looks like. Turn that around. Put a little bit of force on there, I guess. Oh. Okay, so that came loose. So we'll take that apart. It's just a real small inline filter.
Why is it supposed to look all bent out of shape?
It's bent because when it comes down, this guy, when it tightens it down and crushes it just a little bit. So that has a nice seal on it. So now we're going to go ahead and open up the bottom. There we go. So you can see the rubber gasket. So when the float is all the way down at the bottom, so this is for the power valve, this nozzle pickup right here. And so as you can see, he's supposed to be just above that guy, so we're probably a little bit out of it. So you can see where he's supposed to be just a little bit above there. And I'll show you that on the drawing in a second. He's supposed to be right about there maybe. So we're a little low. And then the shutoff should be, so the place where that guy, the shutoff should be somewhere about maybe there. So it could be that we're shutting off too early. So it could be that they are out of adjustment. So in this reference, it tells me that the float height is supposed to be 15.2 millimeters, or about 0.598, about 0.6 inches. And on my instruction sheet for my carburetor, it shows me that for the version of the carburetors that I have, which is the 260 model, I'm supposed to be at 1/2 inch. So when this is all the way sitting down, so as the float, it's actually upside down. You can see where the shutoff valve is. So when I'm all the way down, when these floats are bottoming out, I'm supposed to have a 1/2 inch clearance from the edge. So I'm going to remove this. You can see right in there, there's a pin. So I need my tweezers to pull the pin out. Pull it straight up, it comes out nice and easy. And as you can see, and my float comes out. So now I can see all of the openings. I have a ruler, and so I can measure from the machined edge down to where the needle valve is. And so for that I have my calipers. And it's supposed to be 1/2 inch. adjust my calipers for a 1/2 inch. Tighten that down. And that says that from this point here to the end is a 1/2 inch. So that would just touch the top of the float. So that says 1/2 inch right there, and I'm just touching the very top of the shutoff. Were you able to see that? Okay. So before we start to reassemble this, we're going to check to make sure that the power valve is in the right location and orientation, and then we'll shoot some carburetor cleaner in the openings to make sure that they're all clear. So let's look at the power valve next. There. Now 3 of these attach. Okay. Alright, so now you can see which 3 of the screws attach it, and you can see the openings. So the openings are supposed to line up with the openings in the gasket material. So I'm going to leave that one on. I'm going to tighten these other guys back down. Now I read online where they said that there was a trick that if it was running rich, that what they did was they shifted this by about 30 degrees, which then of course closed off the power valve since none of the orifices would line up. So I understand that that was a trick. That looks good. I can see that there's a little bit of fuel in there, so that looks good. So I'm going to set that right there. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to get a little bit of carburetor cleaner, clean this up just a little bit, but mostly to make sure that these openings and orifices are clear. Okay, so we're going to use some carb and throttle body cleaner, and the nice thing is that it has a spray, so we can actually get into these small spots. This stuff is very hazardous. You want to make sure that you have plenty of ventilation. That's why we have this garage door half open. As you can see, we got plenty of ventilation. I'm going to put that on there. In addition, this stuff is so hazardous, you want to make sure that you're wearing safety protection for your eyes. You don't want to get anything sprayed in your face. And you never know, when you're spraying into these openings, it could spray back on you. And I recommend that you wear some kind of gloves. Said, we should be able to see through this orifice. A little bit of spray come out. So it tells us that that one is clear. We're going to look through this orifice, make sure that that is clear. Our little spring. I'm going to put it right there. Okay. So that guy should clean right up. Okay. So we're going to put our filter back in so you can see that looks pretty clean. Alright, so I'm going to go back down in there, and we'll just put this on thumb tight. So, use the cleaner, and then I just use the soap and water with a basically a soft scrub pad.
And that was a part that you took off the top?
This is the part that comes right off of the bottom. So this is the bottom of the float chamber.
Okay.
It's going to go back on there after we put the floats back in and adjust them. So we're going to check the floats next. So we'll put that there. All right. So here is our float. What we're going to do is we're going to put it back in there. So I need my pin. Okay. So if I just put the pin, see the pin goes in the side, right on this side. So if you come around on this side, the pin's going to go right in here. You'll see it starts to come through right there. So I'm going to pull it back a little bit. It's sliding. Okay, so there it goes. And then we just put our washer nut back in. So we can just tighten that down. Okay. Here, the clearance on the power valve. This is that little opening where we just shot some cleaner into there. And so that's where the power valve nozzle is sticking out of the sidewall. And so when we lift it up, it should fall down and just be right on top of that. And that's controlled by that tang. We're going to adjust that tang. So we'll check that first. Here is the tang. Okay. So if I push this tang all the way up, there is the power valve right here. And so you can see when I pull that all the way up, it comes up and it looks like it's just below. So it looks like that one's okay. So it's right below where the power valve is. Just pull this out. So I'm going to take that tang. I can give you something above. So the float, see where the float is? The float's supposed to come down and stop just right above it.
Is that little brass thing you're talking about?
This little brass thing here, that's the intake for the power valve. So that is on our drawing. On our drawing, there's the power valve. See the power valve nozzle? And we're supposed to be 1/32 of an inch above it, so we're just above it. So it took a couple times to adjust that tang to get it. And you want to make sure that you don't bend the two floats, because the two floats are on a piece of metal. So now the next thing we have to do is adjust the level adjustment where we are adjusting the tang.
Yeah, right there.
Okay, so you can see when I push the tang, it comes up. It's just below where the power valve pickup tube is.
Yeah, like that.
So you gotta come up a little bit. So now what we have to do is we have to adjust this tang, flat screwdriver, flat bladed screwdriver to come up so that I have a nice flat surface when I adjust that. And the reason is that we're trying to get it so that this needle valve right here, when it's sitting just on that needle valve right there, it's supposed to be closed. And it doesn't take much to close it. Okay. And that's because when it's down all the way, that means it's fully filled up. But we want to make sure it's filled up and then shut it off. Okay. Okay. Above by just a little bit. So in this case, bend this down. for the other carburetor, which will basically do the same procedure too. Okay, so we have this and that. Alright. What we have to do is put our plan. So we check our rubber gasket, looks good. Float looks good. We got the screws in. Fits on there nicely. Now if you notice, the one screw that goes in the back is actually shorter than the other screws, and that's because it's recessed. The plate is cut down. So the shorter screw goes in the back. Okay, feels good. So, there is our carburetor. So, we can clean this up a little bit before we put it back in the car. But, pretty much we're ready to go. Just slide her into place. Okay. And that's because when we slide the linkages into place, it turns out it's easiest to do it like that. So now, we're going to take our washers. So all we got to do is put the washer up here. Start. If you let it come forward a little bit, because you can see there's not much clearance, and if you pushed it all the way up there and tried to put the nut in there, you actually couldn't. You actually have to let it come forward on the bolts. You see that?
Say that again.
Okay. When you go to put the carburetors back on, let me take the nut off. If you hold the carburetor all the way up here, you can't actually get the screw very well in there. There's just only that much space to fit it. So it actually works easier if you let it come forward a little bit. That gives you that much more room to be able to get the nut inside the body. And then of course the bottom nuts are blind nuts, so you can't really see them, and then of course you have to move this linkage out of the way. Kind of hold it out of the way a little bit. And you come in sort of with your fingertips. Get that up and in there. Like that.
Okay.
So these are really a pain to get on, because you have to come in at an angle and up, and then just kind of turn them with your fingertips. See, I kind of rock it up there.
Yeah.
It is a real pain. This last one is really hard because it's actually blind. You can't even see it coming up from the bottom. It's in a tight spot. That way I can get my wrench in there. If you remember when we were taking it apart, I said you got to hold the valve open, and that way I can get this guy up. I can actually get my wrench. I can actually see where I'm getting my wrench on there. Okay. This guy, there might be enough room, but you can actually get the box ends on there. But as soon as you tighten them down, there's not much room. So see how that is? So and then we're going to tighten up here on the opposite corner. This guy's going to go on here like that. So I have to line this guy up like this. So start that guy there. Now I'm going to put this guy here, and I have to line up. Let me just kind of hook him on there. What I have to do is I have to get this here. So that linkage goes there. You can see it's going to come forward, right? So I have to come forward, pick up that linkage. And let's see. So that guy's going to go right there. Okay. So that linkage is going to go right here. Okay. And I have to slide it kind of on there. Oops. Okay. So this one, I always found best if I put a little bit of grease on my fingertips. It'll hold it in place better. So that way I can hold it with my fingertip and then try and get it started and spin it. So a little bit of grease. That down. By doing that, by pushing this down, right? So what I did was I just used my screwdriver to hold that down by putting it on the other side of this. Mm-hmm. Now I can get my wrench in here, right? Because I have to be able to go in here. If this guy is down, then I can't get in there. So that's a trick. I should be able to. Oh, I got the bottom two tight. There's the top two are now tight. So we are good to go. All right, so now we have to tighten down this line. So this is the radiator jacket that heats the bottom of the carburetors. Keeps it nice and warm in the winter and cool in the summer. Quickly. Okay. Here is our, I guess that's going to go underneath. Here's our anti-backfire. Goes right there. Okay, all right. Fuel line, water line, water line, water line, water line. So now we have to tighten that water line down. It's a 19-inch metric, 19 millimeters. We remember to take our foam stopper out. So we have that out of there. Okay. Okay. Water jacket, water jacket, water jacket, water jacket. Okay. Smog pump. It's back on there. Got that. Tighten that guy down. So there's our smog pump. It feels good. That should go back on here. Got that. Got there. Okay. All right, so now we need our balance. This is our idle adjusters in balance. So you can see it goes here. It's gonna slide down there. goes there. That one goes there. This one goes here. And slides down. Slides down. Should be some screws. Okay, so when I start, when I turn the key, we should be able to hear the fuel going into the carburetors. And hopefully we won't have any fuel leaking out if we put everything back in properly.
Sounds like something.
Here, change pitch. There. Now the carburetor should be full of gas. Do you smell any gas leaking anywhere?
No.
That's good. And no gas came bubbling up through the valve seat. That's good, because if we had adjusted the floats incorrectly and it didn't shut off, then the gas would have kept pumping through and it pumped right up. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I am going to put a little bit of gas into the carburetor, just so that it has a little gas to try and start with for the very first time. There. There we go. Oh, put the damper back on top. Yeah, it would actually start with that not in there. Okay, I think we got everything. This one is going to go over here. That goes to the air cleaner. All right, baby, baby, baby. I have installed the air filter, and after doing some checking, what we found was that the wire had actually been knocked off of the high voltage coil. And so by putting that on, you will see that this will start right up. So the HM46s, everything is connected. We have the air filter installed. We now have our high coil tension wires hooked up. A little bit of choke. running. So, we're gonna take it for a road trip.